For as long as I can remember, my life has been dedicated to something greater than myself. My name is Sister Mary, and I have lived in a small convent nestled in the heart of Virginia, just outside Charlottesville. From the moment I felt the first whispers of God's call as a young girl, I knew my path would lead me to a life of devotion. I wasn't coerced or persuaded into it. This was my heart's desire, a longing that I could never fully explain to those outside the faith. Growing up, my family attended church every Sunday without fail. My mother's hands, worn and calloused from years of work, would always press into mine during prayer, her voice steady as she recited the verses. My father, a man of few words but deep conviction, would bow his head reverently, embodying the kind of silent faith that I admired. It was within these small moments, watching the sunlight stream through stained glass windows or hearing the deep resonance of the choir, that I felt something awaken inside me. As a teenager, while others dreamed of careers, adventure, and romance, my dreams were simpler. I wanted to serve. I wanted to be a vessel for God's work, to carry His love to those who needed it most. The day I stepped through the arched doors of the St. Augustine convent for the first time, I felt an overwhelming sense of belonging. The world outside the convent walls seemed chaotic, but here everything felt intentional, meaningful. The convent was quiet, but never silent. The soft hum of daily prayer filled its hallways, mingling with the rustle of habits and the gentle laughter of my fellow sisters. The gardens behind the chapel became my sanctuary, a place where I would often sit in solitude, feeling the gentle warmth of the sun on my face as I reflected on Scripture. The work was not easy, but it was fulfilling. I spent my days teaching at the local parish school, organizing food drives, and visiting the sick. Each action, no matter how small, felt like a step closer to God. I often wondered about the fragility of life as I sat beside hospital beds, holding the hands of strangers in their final moments. Their breaths would grow shallow, their eyes often reflecting a mixture of fear and peace. I would whisper prayers over them, assuring them that they were not alone, that God was waiting to welcome them home. It was in these moments that I felt my faith deepen. But my devotion was not without its challenges. There were moments of doubt, whispers in my mind questioning whether I was doing enough or if I was truly worthy of the path I had chosen. Late at night, I would sit before the Blessed Sacrament, pouring out my fears in silent prayer. And every time I felt the same gentle reassurance, like the embrace of a parent calming a frightened child. The sisters at the convent became more than just my companions. They were my family. Sister Catherine, with her ever-present smile, would share stories of her youth, her laughter echoing through the dining hall. Sister Agnes, though stern and disciplined, had a heart of gold, always the first to comfort anyone in need. Together, we were a tapestry of faith, woven together by our shared love for God. For years, my life followed a steady rhythm: prayer, service, reflection. I lived with a sense of peace, content in the knowledge that I was fulfilling my purpose. But life, as I would soon learn, has a way of surprising even the most faithful among us. It began subtly, almost imperceptibly. I would feel a strange fatigue after my morning prayers, a heaviness in my limbs that I attributed to overwork. But as weeks turned into months, the fatigue grew. Simple tasks became burdensome, and the vibrant energy that once carried me through each day seemed to fade. When I finally sought medical attention, the diagnosis came swiftly and without hesitation: cancer. The doctor, a kind man named Dr. Reynolds, explained that the disease had already progressed significantly. There were treatment options, but they offered little more than borrowed time. I returned to the convent that evening, clutching the rosary in my hands as I sat in the chapel. The sisters gathered around me, their faces etched with sorrow as they prayed fervently for a miracle. I could see the pain in their eyes, the unspoken questions lingering in the air. But within me there was no fear, no anger, only acceptance. God's will was always perfect. I had believed this my entire life. If this was the path He had chosen for me, then I would walk it with the same faith that had carried me through every other trial. My illness was not a punishment, nor was it a battle to be fought. It was simply the next chapter in my journey. I spent my days in quiet reflection, feeling my body grow weaker with each passing week. The sisters cared for me with such tenderness, their hands brushing my forehead, their prayers whispered over me like a gentle lullaby. I found solace in their love, in their unwavering devotion, and in the presence of God, which seemed closer than ever. But even in the stillness of those days, I began to sense that this was not the end of my story. There was something more, something I could not yet see. Before we continue this story, I want to take a moment to welcome you to our community. If this message resonates with you, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support means the world to us and allows us to share these powerful testimonies with even more people. And if you'd like to receive a special message in our next video, leave a comment with your name and your city below. We'll mention you by name and share our gratitude with our entire community. Don't miss this chance to be part of something truly special. The days that followed my diagnosis were surreal. The weight of the news hung heavily in the air, not just for me but for everyone in the convent. Sister Agnes, who was usually composed and stoic, wept openly during evening prayers. Sister Catherine, always quick with a comforting word, would often pause mid-sentence, as if she were grappling with emotions too strong to articulate. I tried to console them, but I knew their sorrow stemmed from love, a love that could not be easily quieted. The truth was, I felt oddly detached from my illness. My body was failing, yes, but my spirit remained steadfast. There was a peace within me that I could not explain, a calm assurance that God's hand was in everything. I spent hours in the chapel, the soft flicker of candlelight illuminating the crucifix above the altar. I prayed not for healing, but for understanding, for the strength to accept whatever lay ahead. One evening, as the sisters gathered for Vespers, I felt a sharp pain in my chest. It was unlike anything I had experienced before, deep, searing, and unrelenting. I clutched the edge of the pew, trying to steady myself as the world around me began to blur. Voices called out, distant and muffled, as if coming from the other end of a long tunnel. I felt hands on my shoulders, heard Sister Catherine's voice pleading for someone to call an ambulance. The next thing I knew, I was lying on the cold tile floor of the chapel, staring up at the vaulted ceiling. The pain was all-encompassing, radiating through every fiber of my being. My vision dimmed, and for a moment, I thought I saw the faint outline of light breaking through the stained glass windows. But this was no ordinary light. It shimmered and pulsed as if alive, drawing me toward it. The world around me began to fade. The voices of the sisters, the flicker of the candles, even the weight of my own body, all of it dissolved into nothingness. What replaced it was a sensation unlike anything I had ever known. I felt weightless, as if the burdens of my physical form had been lifted entirely. The pain that had gripped me so fiercely just moments before was gone, replaced by a profound sense of peace. I tried to orient myself to understand what was happening. Was this death? Had I crossed the threshold from this life to the next? I could still feel a faint connection to my body, as though it were a distant memory, but I no longer felt bound by it. I was moving, or rather being moved, drawn toward something far greater than myself. The light grew brighter, enveloping me in its warmth. It was not the harsh, glaring light of the sun but a soft, golden radiance that seemed to reach deep into my soul. As I drew closer, I began to hear something, a melody so beautiful that it brought tears to my eyes. It was not music in the traditional sense but a harmony, a symphony of voices and sounds that resonated with every part of my being. Then I saw them, figures emerging from the light, their forms radiant and ethereal. They were not strangers. I recognized them instantly, though I could not say how. There was Father John, the parish priest who had guided me in my youth, his face glowing with joy. Beside him was my grandmother, her hands outstretched as if to welcome me home. And behind them countless others, faces both familiar and unfamiliar, yet each one carrying a sense of deep connection. They did not speak, yet I understood them perfectly. Their presence was a testament to the reality of what lay beyond this life. There was no fear, no sorrow, only love, a love so pure and all-encompassing that it left me breathless. As I moved closer, I felt a pull, a gentle yet insistent force guiding me forward. The light seemed to open before me, revealing a path that stretched into infinity. I took a step, then another, each one filled with a sense of purpose and belonging. I had no doubt that I was being led towards something extraordinary. But then, just as suddenly as it began, the movement stopped. I found myself standing at the edge of the light, looking out into its vastness. A voice, gentle yet commanding, filled the air around me, though it seemed to come from within my very soul. "Not yet," it said. The words reverberated through me, and I felt an ache unlike any I had ever known. I wanted to move forward, to step fully into the light, but something held me back. I turned, and for the first time I saw the world I had left behind. The sisters were still in the chapel, their heads bowed in prayer, their faces streaked with tears. I could see my own body lying on the floor, pale and motionless. The sight should have frightened me, but it didn't. Instead, it filled me with a sense of clarity. There was still something I had to do. The moment lingered, suspended between two worlds, between the weight of the earth and the lightness of eternity. I was no longer tethered to my body, yet I could still feel the faint echo of its presence, like a shadow that refused to fade completely. The light before me pulsed gently, alive in a way that defied explanation. It wasn't just light. It was a presence, something that reached into the deepest parts of my being and wrapped itself around me with a warmth I had never known. I found myself moving toward it, though I didn't walk in the way I would on earth. It was as though the light itself carried me, guiding me forward with an invisible hand. There was no hesitation, no fear. Each step, or rather each moment, drew me closer to something that felt more real than anything I had ever experienced. The melodies I had heard earlier grew louder, more intricate. They were not merely sounds. They were expressions of something greater, an unending symphony that resonated within me. I felt as though I could hear colors, see vibrations, and touch emotions. The air, if it could even be called that, was thick with life, saturated with love and peace. And then it hit me. This was not merely a place. This was the presence of God. The realization washed over me, bringing with it a flood of emotions so intense that I thought I might dissolve into them. Awe, joy, gratitude, they mingled together, creating a sense of belonging that was beyond words. I had spent my life in service, striving to feel God's closeness in prayer and sacrament, and yet nothing could have prepared me for this. I began to notice details within the light, shapes forming and shifting as I moved closer. There was a sense of order, of design, yet it was not rigid or confined. Everything flowed seamlessly, as if every element existed in perfect harmony with the others. The boundaries of time and space seemed to blur, and for the first time I understood what it meant to be truly free. I thought of the years I had spent in the convent, the moments of doubt and struggle that had often clouded my faith. They seemed so small now, like fleeting shadows against the brilliance of this light. Every sacrifice, every prayer, every act of love, they had all led to this moment, and in the face of such overwhelming beauty, they felt utterly worth it. But the most profound realization came when I felt the presence of others. It wasn't like seeing people in the physical sense, but I knew they were there. Souls, radiant and whole, moved within the light, each one unique yet connected to the others in a way that transcended individuality. I could sense their joy, their peace, and their love, and it was impossible not to share in it. Somehow, I understood that these were the souls of those who had gone before me, those who had loved and been loved by God. I recognized some of them, though their earthly appearances were no longer relevant. There was Father John, his presence as strong and steady as his faith had been in life. My grandmother, whose gentle hands I had held during her final days, now radiated with a light that seemed to pour from her very being. They did not speak, but their presence spoke volumes. I felt their welcome, their joy at seeing me here. It was as though they had been waiting for this moment, and their love enveloped me like a warm embrace. Then, without warning, I felt a shift. The light around me seemed to expand, stretching out in every direction. The melodies deepened, taking on a richness that made my soul tremble. I was being drawn further in, pulled toward something even greater than the presence I had already felt. As I moved, I became aware of a new sensation, a profound stillness that was somehow alive, pulsating with energy and purpose. It was not empty or void. It was full, brimming with meaning that I could feel but not yet fully comprehend. And then I felt it. A presence unlike any other. It was vast, powerful, and filled with a love so deep that it seemed to pierce through every part of me. It was closer than my own breath and yet surrounded everything, saturating the very essence of this place. I didn't need to see him to know who it was. Every fiber of my being recognized him, not as a stranger or a distant figure from scripture, but as someone I had always known. It was Jesus. His presence was unlike anything I had ever imagined. It was not just an encounter. It was a reunion, as though I were returning to someone I had loved and been loved by my entire life. The peace I had felt before now deepened into something far greater, a sense of being fully known and fully loved. As I moved closer, I felt everything within me come alive. The doubts, fears, and insecurities that had once plagued me fell away, replaced by an overwhelming certainty that I was exactly where I was meant to be. I could feel his love before I saw him, waves of it washing over me, filling every empty space within my soul. It was not just love as we understand it on earth. It was perfect, unconditional, absolute. And then, through the brilliance of the light, I saw him. The moment I saw him, everything else faded into insignificance. Jesus stood before me, radiant and alive, more real than anything I had ever known. His presence was overwhelming, not because of his brilliance, but because of the love that emanated from him in waves so deep and vast that they seemed to encompass the very fabric of this place. He was not distant, nor was he a figure of reverence alone. He was close, familiar, like a friend I had known all my life yet never truly understood. His face held infinite wisdom, kindness, and compassion. His eyes, oh his eyes, seemed to see everything, every hidden corner of my soul, every doubt, every failure, every whispered prayer. And yet, there was no judgment there, only a love so profound that it brought me to my knees. Tears streamed down my face, but they were not tears of sorrow. They were tears of release, of gratitude, of awe. For the first time I felt completely whole, completely seen, and completely loved. I could feel the weight of my earthly life falling away. The fears, the regrets, the moments of doubt, and in their place was a peace so absolute that it seemed to flow through my very being. I didn't know how long I knelt there, my hands trembling, my heart overflowing. Time felt meaningless in his presence. All that mattered was this moment, this connection, this love that was beyond words. And then he spoke. His voice was unlike anything I had ever heard. It was not just a sound. It was a truth that resonated deep within me, filling every part of my being. It was both gentle and powerful, tender and commanding. "My beloved child," he said, his words carrying a warmth that seemed to wrap around me. "I have always been with you." In that instant, every moment of my life flashed before me, not as a series of memories, but as a living tapestry woven together by his presence. I saw the times I had felt his closeness, the times I had doubted, the times I had faltered. And through it all, I saw his hand guiding me, his love sustaining me, his grace lifting me when I could not stand on my own. I wanted to speak, to thank him, to pour out the gratitude that filled my heart, but no words came. He didn't seem to need them. He understood everything I wanted to say, everything I couldn't express. He reached out his hand, and the moment he touched mine, a wave of warmth and light surged through me. It was as though his very essence was pouring into me, filling every empty space, healing every wound, both seen and unseen. I felt lighter, freer, as though the burdens I had carried for so long had been lifted entirely. Then he showed me something that left me breathless. The light around us shifted, and I saw the world, our world, as he sees it. I saw people in their joy and in their sorrow, in their triumphs and their struggles. I saw the ways they sought him, the prayers they whispered in the quiet moments, the acts of kindness they offered when no one was watching. But I also saw the pain, the doubt, the fear that kept so many from truly embracing him. I saw how easily people became distracted, caught up in the noise and busyness of life, forgetting the deeper purpose for which they were created. I saw the ways they postponed their faith, telling themselves there would always be time later. And my heart ached, because I knew that later was never guaranteed. Jesus turned to me, his eyes filled with both sorrow and hope. "They must know," he said, his voice soft yet firm. "They must understand the depth of my love, the urgency of the time they have been given." I nodded, the weight of his words pressing into my soul. This was not just a revelation for me. This was a message, a call to action, a purpose that I could not ignore. Before we move to the next part of this journey, I want to take a moment to connect with you. If this story has touched your heart, please take a second to like this video and share it with others who might need to hear it. And here's something special. Leave a comment below with your name and the city you're watching from. In our next video, we'll give you a personal shout-out, sharing your name with our entire community. It's our way of showing gratitude for your support and making you a part of this incredible journey. Don't miss this chance to hear your name and feel the love of our growing family. The weight of his words settled deep within me. They must know. I felt it not just as a command but as a calling, something far greater than myself. This was not simply a moment of revelation. It was a mission, a divine purpose placed into my hands by Jesus himself. I looked at him, my heart pounding with both awe and urgency. There was so much I wanted to ask, so much I longed to understand. But before I could speak, he reached out once more, and the world around us shifted. Suddenly, I was no longer in that place of light and peace. Instead, I was seeing through his eyes, witnessing the world as it truly was. I saw streets bustling with people, their faces lined with worry and exhaustion. I saw families torn apart by bitterness and misunderstanding, friends separated by pride and anger. I saw people chasing after things that would never satisfy them. Money, fame, temporary pleasures, always searching, never finding. And then I saw something even more painful. I saw those who had turned away from him. Some had done so out of hurt, wounded by the brokenness of the world, convinced that God had forgotten them. Others had simply become indifferent, their hearts hardened by the distractions of life. And then there were those who had promised themselves they would seek him later, when they had more time, when it was more convenient. But time is never guaranteed. I saw souls standing at the edge of eternity, unprepared, unaware of how close they had come to stepping into forever without knowing him. I saw the regret, the longing in their eyes, the realization that the time they thought they had was now gone. A deep sorrow filled me. I wanted to reach out to tell them that it wasn't too late, that Jesus was still waiting, still calling. But then I felt his presence beside me once more. "They must know," he repeated, his voice filled with both urgency and love. "And you must tell them." I turned to him, my heart pounding. "How?" I asked, my voice trembling. "How can I make them understand?" His gaze held mine, steady and unwavering. "Live," he said. "Be. Love. Show them who I am." I felt something shift inside me, a fire igniting in my soul. This was my purpose. This was why I had been brought here, not just to witness but to return. And in that instant I knew. I wasn't staying. I wanted to. I longed for it with everything in me. The peace, the love, the overwhelming presence of God. It was all I had ever desired. But my work was not finished. My journey was not complete. Tears filled my eyes as I looked at Jesus one last time. "I will go," I whispered. He smiled, a smile filled with both joy and sorrow, as though he understood that this was not an easy choice for me. "You will not be alone," he said. And then, before I could say anything else, the light around me began to shift. The warmth that had surrounded me faded. The music, the voices, the beauty of eternity, it all began to blur, pulling away from me as though I were being drawn back through a great distance. And then there was nothing. Darkness, silence, a weight pressing down on me, heavy and unfamiliar. And then, gasp, air filled my lungs, burning as though I had been without it for far too long. My chest rose and fell in ragged breaths, my heart pounding against my ribs. I felt the roughness of fabric beneath me, the firm pressure of hands gripping mine. Voices, distant but growing clearer, echoed around me. "She's breathing." A prayer whispered in disbelief. I forced my eyes open, and the light above me was not the light of heaven, but the dim glow of candles flickering in the chapel. The faces around me were familiar. Sister Agnes, Sister Catherine, the others, all of them staring at me with wide, tear-filled eyes. I was back. The sisters wept openly, their hands covering their mouths in shock. Some knelt beside me, clutching their rosaries, their lips moving in silent prayers of gratitude. I could hear the distant sound of footsteps, hurried and frantic. The doors burst open, and the doctors rushed in, their expressions frozen in disbelief. Just hours ago, they had declared that I would not last the night. And yet, here I was, alive, breathing, whole. One of the doctors, Dr. Reynolds, stepped forward, his voice shaking. "This isn't possible," he murmured, placing his stethoscope to my chest. I watched his face as he listened, his brow furrowing deeper with every beat of my heart. He checked my pulse, my breathing, my reflexes. Then, finally, he pulled back, looking at me with something close to fear. "The cancer, it's gone." A gasp rippled through the room. The sisters clutched at one another, their eyes filling with fresh tears. I could see the questions in their expressions, the desperate need to understand what had just happened. But I knew. I knew because I had stood before Jesus. I had felt his love, heard his call. I had been sent back for a reason. And now it was time to fulfill my mission. I sat up slowly, my body responding effortlessly, as though the months of illness had never happened. The pain, the weakness, the relentless exhaustion, it was all gone. The body that had betrayed me, that had withered under the weight of disease, was now full of strength, vibrant with life. Gasps filled the chapel as the sisters stared at me in disbelief. Some were crying openly, clutching at their rosaries as though afraid that if they let go, the moment would disappear like a dream. Others simply knelt, hands clasped in silent prayer, their lips moving but no words escaping. Dr. Reynolds was still frozen in place, his face pale. He had seen me at my weakest. He had watched as my body faded, had told the sisters to prepare for the inevitable. And now he was staring at me as though I had risen from the grave itself. "This," he swallowed hard. "This isn't possible." I looked at him, my heart swelling with something deeper than just relief. "It's not just possible," I whispered. "It's a miracle." Silence stretched between us, heavy and sacred. I could feel the weight of what had happened settling into the room, pressing into every heart, every soul that bore witness to this moment. Sister Agnes, her voice trembling, finally spoke. "Maria, what happened?" I turned to her, to all of them, and the words rose in my throat like fire. "I was with him," I said softly. Gasps rippled through the room, and I saw the way their eyes widened, the way their fingers tightened around their rosaries. Even Dr. Reynolds took a step back, his scientific mind grappling with something beyond his understanding. I took a breath, steadying myself. I was in heaven. I saw the kingdom he has prepared for us. And I spoke with Jesus. A heavy silence followed, the kind that hangs in the air when something too vast, too holy, has been spoken. One of the younger sisters, her eyes still glistening with tears, whispered, "Jesus." He nodded. "He showed me things. Things I can never unsee. He showed me the love that surrounds us, the beauty that awaits us. But he also showed me the sorrow of the world. The people who are lost, who are waiting, thinking they have more time." I looked at each of them, my heart pounding. "He sent me back for a reason." A murmur spread through the chapel, disbelief and awe mingling in equal measure. Some of them already believed, I could see it in their faces, the unwavering faith that did not need proof, only truth. Others hesitated, wanting to believe but afraid to let go of reason, of logic. Dr. Reynolds let out a shaky breath. "You were clinically dead," he said, as if trying to convince himself. "Your heart stopped. There was no pulse." He shook his head. "And now you're here, completely healed." I reached for his hand, looking into his eyes. "Do you still doubt?" He didn't answer. He only looked away, his hands trembling. I turned back to the sisters. Jesus gave me a message. We don't have as much time as we think. So many people live as if they can turn to God later, as if faith is something to be put off until it's convenient. I shook my head, my voice firm. But later is never guaranteed. Tears streamed down Sister Agnes's face. What do we do? She whispered. I took her hands in mine, gripping them tightly. We tell them. We tell everyone. We don't stay silent. We don't wait for someone else to spread his word. We live our lives as proof that he is real, that he is calling us home. A fire burned in my chest, one that I knew would never be extinguished. I had been given a second chance, not just to live but to share what I had seen, and I would not waste it. If this testimony has touched your heart, I invite you to become part of our community. We don't make money from this, we do it because we love sharing these stories, because we believe they can change lives. If you want to support us, the best way to do that is by liking this video and subscribing to the channel. It's a simple gesture, but it helps more people hear this message, more people find hope, more people feel the presence of God in their lives. Thank you for being here with us. The days that followed my return felt like waking from a dream, except the dream was real, and the world I had come back to felt dim in comparison to what I had seen. The warmth of heaven still lingered within me. The voice of Jesus still echoed in my soul, but I was here, among the living, with a mission that burned in my heart. Word of what had happened spread beyond the convent walls. People came, priests, believers, skeptics, doctors, strangers from the town, each with questions, each searching for something. Some wanted to hear about heaven, about what it was like, what I had seen, what I had felt. Others wanted proof, something tangible they could grasp onto, something that would convince their doubting hearts. But I told them the truth. Faith is not about seeing. Faith is about knowing, about believing even when you cannot touch something with your hands. I told them about the love I had experienced, the light that had surrounded me, the presence of Jesus that had filled me with more peace than I had ever thought possible. I told them that heaven was real, not just as a place but as a promise waiting for those who choose to seek him, to trust him, to surrender to his love. But I also told them the warning. I told them how Jesus had shown me the people of this world, lost in their distractions, caught up in temporary things that held no eternal value. How so many lived as if they had all the time in the world, as if they could turn to him someday. Someday. The most dangerous lie the enemy has ever whispered into our hearts. Because someday is never guaranteed. People listened. Some wept. Some fell to their knees, repenting in that very moment, their hearts broken open by the truth of what they had heard. But others turned away. I saw it in their eyes. The fear of surrender, the resistance to letting go of their control. Some wanted to believe but could not. Some simply refused to. I thought of the moment I stood before Jesus, the moment I had seen eternity stretched out before me. I wanted to make them understand. This life is just a breath, a flicker of time compared to what comes next. Nothing we build here, nothing we chase after, none of the things we think matter will last. Only love, only faith, only him. The mission Jesus gave me was clear. I was not sent back to keep this revelation to myself. I was sent back to speak, share, to wake people up before it's too late. And now I am telling you, you are watching this now not by accident but because Jesus is calling you. Maybe you have felt distant from him. Maybe you have been waiting for the right time to seek him, to give your heart fully. Maybe you have been caught in the distractions of this world, thinking that there will always be more time. But there is no more time to waste. He's calling you now. Don't wait until it's too late. Don't wait until the end to finally open your heart to him. Don't live your life thinking that faith is something you can pursue when it's convenient. He wants you now. Before you go, I want to invite you to keep walking this journey with us. The next video waiting for you will be revealing, something that will transform the way you see everything. All you have to do is click on the video that's appearing on your screen right now. And if this message spoke to your heart, if you know that Jesus is calling you today, leave a comment saying Amen below. This is your act of faith, your way of declaring that you receive this blessing. And don't forget, like this video so that more people can hear this truth. subscribe to our community because we are in this together, and we will continue sharing these powerful messages to awaken as many hearts as possible. Now, click on the next video and let God continue revealing His truth to you.